Passage 1. Mikkel hated the half hour before his older brother got home from school. The house was too quiet and he felt alone. He didn't like feeling that way. In fact, he had insisted to his parents that he would be fine and that he didn't need a babysitter after school. He was old enough to take care of himself. It was only a half hour. On that day, he did what he usually did. He turned on the television loud. He laid out snacks that he and his brother would eat. Their parents had a strange rule about not eating alone, so he had to wait until Manola got home, even if he was starving. He wasn't allowed to cook either, so any snacks he put out had to be cold. And he had to call his mom at the store just to let her know that he was home. The phone rang. It was his mother. "Is Manola home yet?" She sounded worried. The store where she worked was almost an hour away. "Get into the basement," she said. Miguel could tell she was trying to sound calm. "What's the matter, Mom? You know Manola won't be home for another 20 minutes. Manola had a car that he was now that he was 17 and no longer rode on the school bus. "Get down." The telephone cut out. Miguel ran to the window, and even though it was only 4 o'clock, the sky had turned black. Hail hit the roof in the front yard, and every few seconds, lightning lit up the landscape. In one flash, he saw a swirl of a tornado. It headed straight for their house. Then he saw Manola's car about a half a mile away. He was driving fast. "Hurry up, Manola," Miguel whispered to himself. He looked back at the twister, then again towards the road. Manola was almost at the driveway. He opened the door. In the strong wind, it battered against the side of the house. Manola rushed in. Without talking, the two of them headed to the basement. They knew what to do. They huddled together and listened to the roar overhead. It seemed to last forever. Passage 2. Immigration. The United States of America has long been the world's chief receiving nation for immigrants. An immigrant is a person who leaves his or her country to settle in another country. Over the years, millions of people have uprooted and left family and friends to move to America. Some felt forced to leave because they feared for their lives due to the dangers present in their home countries. For example, many immigrants left countries that were at war or that didn't give them the freedom to practice their faith. Immigrants also left their native lands if they couldn't find enough work or enough food to live. Whatever the reason, immigrants usually had to sacrifice a life that is familiar for one that is unknown. The United States was founded by immigrants. From the 1600s through 1775, European colonists settled in the land that is now the United States. Most of these immigrants were from England. Others arrived from France, Germany, Ireland, Scotland, and Spain. Many of these colonists came here looking for economic opportunity. They wanted land or to farm or better work. Others came to escape religious persecution. Some were even convicts brought over from English jails. Since the United States was established in the 1700s, there have been 3 waves of immigration. The first wave of immigration took place from 1820 to 1870. Over 7 million people made the voyage to America, mostly from Northern and Western Europe. About a third of these immigrants were Irish people trying to escape a famine that plagued Ireland in the mid-1840s. Another third of the immigrants came from this wave were German. The Chinese also began to immigrate to America during this time. They got word of the gold rush in California. They came to work in the mines and get rich. This flood of immigrants wasn't always welcomed by those in America. Some feared the newcomers would take away their jobs. Others didn't like the politics, customs, and/or religions the new immigrants brought with them. For example, many Irish people were discriminated against for being Roman Catholic. The Chinese also suffered greatly from discrimination. The next wave of U.S. immigration was by far the greatest. It started in 1881 and ended in 1920. Over 23 million people immigrated to the United States during this period, most of who came from Southern and Eastern Europe. But by this time, anti-immigration sentiments had become so strong that a growing number of people demanded laws to make it harder for foreigners to become American citizens. In 1875, Congress passed its first immigration law intended to limit immigration. It kept people who were viewed as undesirable out, including convicts. In 1882, Congress also passed the Chinese Exclusion Act. It prohibited Chinese workers from coming to the United States. A few years later, other laws were passed. One required adult immigrants to have literacy skills. Another limited the number of immigrants from countries outside the Western Hemisphere. However, one of the greatest blows to immigration was the Great Depression of the 1930s. Immigration sharply declined. In fact, there were more people leaving America than coming to America during this time. The third wave of immigration began in 1965 and continues today. Most immigrants in this wave have come from Asian countries as well as South American countries, Caribbean countries, and Mexico. A large number of these immigrants have settled in the East and Midwest. However, many others have moved to California. Most immigrants have come to America with the hope of building a better life. However, they were sometimes met with hatred by the people already living in the country who feared the economic and cultural impact of these newcomers. While this discrimination and the economic downfall of the Great Depression had a negative effect on the immigration, American immigration has managed to survive.